The machine was built to break people, and it had never once failed. 900 hours was the number nobody reached. And when the human girl walked into the Gravity Crucible on her first day and asked, in that flat, quiet way of hers, what the record was, the instructor laughed at her. We all did. Then she went in, and she didn't come out for a very, very long time. I've told this story to 3 generations of cadets now. Most of them think I'm exaggerating. The ones who have been in the Crucible themselves, even for the standard qualifying runs, those ones don't think I'm exaggerating. Those ones go quiet, and they look at the old machine differently after, and some of them ask to see the number on the wall, the one nobody talks about, the record that still stands and always will. Let me tell you about her. Let me tell you what 900 hours in the Crucible actually costs, and what it means that she paid it, and why even Instructor Vol, hardest creature I ever knew, a being who'd washed out 10,000 cadets without blinking, why even Vol walked away from the observation window in the end and couldn't watch anymore. My name is Corin. Back then, I was a facility tech at the Threshold Combat Academy, the Great War College where the galactic community trained its finest soldiers, out on a cold moon orbiting a gas giant, a place of gray corridors and hard discipline, and the constant low hum of machines built to turn ordinary beings into warriors. Threshold trained everyone. Every species that fielded soldiers sent their best here. It was the hardest military academy in known space, and it was proud of that, and its whole culture was built around a single idea, that the strong were forged, not born, and that the forging had to be merciless or it wasn't real. The cadets who came through Threshold were the toughest the galaxy produced, and the thing that made them tough, the thing at the dark heart of the whole academy, was the Gravity Crucible. I need to explain the Crucible properly, because everything turns on it. It was a training chamber, but that word doesn't capture it. It was a machine for applying suffering with perfect precision. Inside the Crucible, gravity could be dialed up far beyond what any normal world produced, crushing, punishing gravity that made every movement agony, that made simply standing an act of endurance, that made breathing itself a labor. And it wasn't just gravity. The Crucible controlled everything: temperature, atmosphere, light, the very ground underfoot, which could shift and buckle and turn against you. It could simulate any hell. It was designed to push a body and a mind right up to the edge of what they could survive, and hold them there, and see if they broke. Cadets ran the Crucible in sessions. A standard qualifying run was 4 hours. 4 hours in heavy gravity, performing combat drills, pushed to exhaustion. 4 hours was brutal. 4 hours broke plenty of cadets, sent them out weeping, vomiting, unable to walk. The truly gifted, the elite, could push to 8, 10, 12 hours in the deep settings. The Academy's all-time records, held by legendary warriors of the strongest species, sat somewhere around 40, 50 hours in the endurance configurations, achieved over grueling multi-day attempts with monitoring and medical teams standing by. 900 hours was a joke, a figure of speech. When instructors wanted to describe an impossible standard, they'd say, "Sure, and next you'll tell me someone did 900 hours in the Crucible." It was shorthand for never, for cannot be done. The human body, any body, would fail long before then, would die most likely. 900 hours wasn't a record anyone was chasing. It was a number that meant the thing that is impossible. I want you to understand what the machine did to ordinary cadets, so you feel the weight of that number. Because I saw it, day after day, year after year. I saw the finest young warriors of a dozen species go into that chamber full of pride and come out changed. Some came out weeping, big armored soldiers of species that don't weep easily, reduced to tears by 4 hours of gravity that made their own bodies into a torture. Some came out silent, with a look I learned to recognize, a 1,000-yard stare of a body that had been taken past what it thought it could bear. Some didn't come out on their own at all. The medical team carried them. And a few, more than the Academy liked to admit, a few came out and quit. just walked away from their whole careers, their whole futures, everything they'd worked for, because 4 hours in the crucible had shown them a bottom to themselves they couldn't stand to have seen. That was the thing about the machine, the thing Vol believed in with a whole cold heart. It didn't just test you. It showed you yourself. It took you down to the place where all your pride and all your training fell away, and it held you there, and it made you look at what was left. And a lot of beings could not stand what was left. That was the real washout, not the ones whose bodies failed, but the ones who met the truth of themselves in that chamber and couldn't live with it. I ran it once. Just once early on, before I became a tech, I'd come to threshold wanting to be a cadet like everyone does. I lasted 2 hours and 11 minutes. And I'll be honest with you because it matters for the rest of this. Those 2 hours changed my life. Not because I was proud of them, because of what I found at the bottom of them. I found out that I would quit, that when the pressure got past a certain point, some part of me would look for the exit and want it more than anything. I found out I wasn't what I'd hoped I was. And I couldn't be a cadet after that, not really, so I became a tech instead, and spent my career on the safe side of the observation window, watching other people find out what I'd found out about myself. That's who was watching Sela Okonkwo. A man who met his own breaking point at 2 hours and 11 minutes, watching a woman who wouldn't meet hers in 900. You should know that about your narrator. It's why I understood, eventually, better than Vol did at first, that what she was doing in there wasn't strength, because I knew exactly what the bottom felt like, and I could see she was going somewhere the bottom didn't stop her, and that's not a thing a whole and healthy mind does. And then she asked what the record was on her first day, and when they told her the real record around 50 hours, she tilted her head and she asked, "Is that all?" And that's when Instructor Vol laughed. Her name was Sela Okonkwo, and she came from a place called Cars World. If you know Deathworlds, and everyone in the galaxy knew about Deathworlds, the way you know about anything terrifying and far away, then you know the reputation. A Deathworld is a planet that should not, by any reasonable accounting, support intelligent life. Too much gravity, too much radiation, predators and weather and terrain that kill you 100 ways. Most species, when they encountered a Deathworld, marked it uninhabitable and moved on. The galaxy had learned, over the ages, that a few of these hell planets had produced life anyway, tough, dangerous life, forged by conditions that would kill anything softer. And humanity, it turned out, had settled some of the worst of them, because humans were the kind of species that looked at a world trying to kill them, and decided to live there out of sheer stubbornness. Cars World was one of the worst. Heavy gravity, nearly twice galactic standard. A brutal, poisonous atmosphere you needed treated lungs to breathe. Predators that had evolved for millions of years to hunt things exactly the size of a human. It was a place where every single day was a fight to survive, where children learned to run and climb and endure before they learned to read, where the weak simply did not live to grow up. The humans of Cars World were, by galactic reckoning, something close to monsters, not in cruelty but in capability. They were the toughest members of a species already famous for being tougher than they looked, a Deathworlder among Deathworlders. And Sela Okonkwo had grown up there. 22 years of it. 22 years of nearly double gravity, of a world that killed the unfit, of a childhood most galactic species could not have physically survived. And then she'd left, one of the rare few who got off Cars World, who tested into the galactic academies, who came out into the wider civilization carrying a body and a will forged by the worst planet humans had ever chosen to live on. I learned later what a childhood on Cars World actually meant, and I want to give you a piece of it because it explains her. On Cars World, she told me once, children were taught a thing called the count. From the time you could walk, an adult was always counting, quietly, constantly, keeping track of every child, because on a world where death came that fast and that often, the only way to keep a child alive was to know where they were every single second. You grew up inside the count. You grew up knowing that someone was always keeping track of you, always ready, and that the moment the count slipped, The moment an adult lost track of you for even a breath was the moment the world could take you. And when you got old enough, you became a counter. You started keeping the count for the younger ones. That was how you knew you'd grown up on Car's world. Not a ceremony, not an age, but the day someone handed you the count and trusted you to keep another life inside it. Sella had been keeping the count since she was very young. She was good at it. The best. She never lost track of the one she was watching. That was her whole identity, the thing she'd been forged into by that terrible world, the one who keeps the count, the one who never loses anyone, the one you could trust to always know where the little ones were and always be ready. Hold that in your mind. Because everything that happened in the Crucible, everything she was carrying, everything that finally broke her at 900 hours, all of it grows out of that one thing. She was a keeper of the count, and the count once had slipped. And on Car's world, when the count slips, someone dies. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. I do that with this story. Some stories you can't tell in a straight line, because the end is inside the beginning the whole time. She came to Threshold to become a soldier, and on her first day they showed her the Gravity Crucible, the Academy's great machine of suffering, the thing that broke the galaxy's toughest warriors, and they set it to the standard heavy configuration to demonstrate, and they expected her to be impressed, cowed, the way every new cadet was. Instead, she stood in that crushing artificial gravity, the setting that made hardened cadets stagger, and she just stood there, comfortably, like it was nothing, because it was nothing. It was less than the gravity she'd been born under. The Crucible's punishing heavy setting was, to a daughter of Car's world, roughly a pleasant afternoon back home. I was there for that first demonstration, and I want to tell you about the other cadets watching, because their faces told the whole story of what she was walking into. The incoming class was gathered on the observation deck. The tradition, on the first day, was to bring the new cadets up to watch a demonstration run so they'd understand what they were in for, so the fear would set in early. And they were the usual mix. Proud young warriors from a dozen-strong species, most of them physically imposing, all of them certain of themselves the way you're certain of yourself right before the Crucible teaches you otherwise. And they'd been watching Sella since she arrived, the small human, from that species everyone still half thought of as unproven newcomers. And I could see them sizing her up, deciding she was nothing, filing her under the weak one, the one who won't last. And then the demonstration setting came on, that heavy crushing gravity, and they watched a volunteer cadet, a big proud one, from one of the strong species, get put into it and stagger and labor, and last about 90 seconds before signaling out, shaking. And then Vol, making a point, gestured Sella in. To show the new class what the machine did even to a Deathworlder, I think Vol expected. To cow her along with the rest. And she walked into the setting that had just staggered a warrior twice her size, and she stood in it, and she looked around, unbothered, and after a moment she asked, not performing, just genuinely asking, "Is it supposed to get heavier than this?" I watched the faces on the observation deck change. All at once. That fast recalibration, the whole class revising everything they decided about the small human in the space of one sentence. It's a thing I've seen a few times in my life and never gotten tired of. The moment a room realizes it had someone completely wrong. They'd filed her under the weak one. And now they were staring at her through the glass, and you could see them all thinking the same thing. What is she? What kind of place makes a person for whom the machine that breaks us is a light afternoon? And that was the first crack in everyone's certainty about the machine. Because the Gravity Crucible had been built to punish bodies with gravity. And here was a body that gravity had already, long ago, made its peace with. I want to tell you about Instructor Vol, because Vol matters as much as Sella does, and the title of this whole story is as much about Vol as about her. Vol was the Academy's Biotech Instructor, the one in charge of the Crucible, and of the physical conditioning of every cadet who came through Threshold. Vol's species, the Dreeth, were themselves a hardy people, and Vol was hard even among them. An old, scarred, utterly unsentimental being who had spent centuries breaking cadets down and building them back up, and who had a philosophy about it that never once wavered. Vol believed that strength was a thing you proved by suffering, that the crucible didn't create strength, it revealed it, that it stripped away everything soft and false and showed you what a being was truly made of, underneath. Vol had watched 10,000 cadets go into that machine, and Vol had a reputation for reading them perfectly. One look, one session, and Vol could tell you exactly how far a cadet would go and exactly where they'd break. Vol was never wrong. In centuries of it, Vol was never wrong about a cadet's limit. And Vol looked at Sela Okonkwo, the Deathworld girl who stood comfortably in the heavy setting, and made an assessment, the way Vol always did. And I was there for it, and I remember it, because it's where the whole story really begins. Vol said, "Gravity means nothing to you, I can see that. Your world already gave you that gift, and it's a real gift, and you didn't earn it, it was given to you by the accident of where you were born. So the crucible has nothing to teach you about gravity." Vol's cold eyes studied her. "But the crucible is not really about gravity, cadet. Gravity is only the tool. The crucible is about finding the place where you break. Everyone has one. Everyone. The strongest body in the galaxy still has a mind, and every mind has a bottom, a place past which it cannot be pushed. Your body may be a Deathworld gift, but your mind is still just a mind, and I will find its bottom, I always do." A pause. "You want to know the record? You'll help me set a new one, I think. Not because you're tough, because I'm curious how deep the well goes in someone the machine can't reach the ordinary way. We're going to have to go looking for your breaking point the hard way, and we will find it. We always find it." And Sela looked at this ancient scarred instructor who had broken 10,000 warriors, and she said, quietly, "My whole world was a machine for finding where people break. Everyone I grew up with either found their breaking point or died. I'm one of the ones who didn't die." She was silent a moment. "So look all you want, but I should tell you I've been looked at by a whole planet already, and it never found the bottom either. Here's the thing you have to understand about what happened next, and it's the thing that makes this story different from the simple version people tell. The simple version is, tough Deathworld girl goes into the machine, sets an impossible record, everyone's amazed, humanity's the strongest, the end. And that's not wrong exactly. She did set the record, 900 hours, it still stands. But that's not what the story is about, because the story isn't really about how strong she was. It's about why she stayed in that machine for 900 hours, and what it cost, and what Vol saw through that observation window that finally, after centuries of watching cadets suffer without flinching, made even Vol walk away. Because here's what nobody understood at the start, what took the whole 900 hours to reveal. Sela Okonkwo didn't stay in the crucible because she was tough. Toughness would have gotten her through a long run and out the other side, proud and unbroken. She stayed for 900 hours because she was looking for something. Because there was a reason a young woman from a Deathworld would walk into a machine built to break people and refuse to come out. A reason that had nothing to do with records or pride or proving anything to anyone. She had come to Threshold carrying something. And the Crucible, the one place in the galaxy built to strip a being down to what they truly were, the Crucible was, for her, not a test. It was a confession. It was the only place she'd ever found that could hold the weight of what she was carrying, because it was the only place that pushed back as hard as the thing inside her pushed. And it took 900 hours for that to come out. And when it did, it broke her, not the gravity, not the machine, but the thing she'd been carrying, finally surfacing. And it made the hardest instructor in the galaxy walk away from the window, because Vol had spent centuries looking for where cadets break, and had never once, in all that time, seen a breaking like hers, or understood until that moment that there are things that live inside a person that no machine was ever built to measure. The run started as a standard endurance attempt. It did not stay standard for long. Vol set the crucible to a configuration meant to challenge a deathworlder, gravity dialed up past even Car's world's punishing pull, into ranges that would have crushed a normal cadet flat. And Sella worked in it. Combat drills, endurance sets, the standard protocol, hour after hour. And she handled it. Not easily, even a deathworlder feels gravity above what she was born to, but she handled it, steady and quiet and unbroken, past the 4-hour standard, past the 8-hour elite mark, past 12, past 20. I was on the monitoring team. That was my job during runs: watch the readouts, track the vitals, flag anything dangerous. And in those first days I watched Sella Okonkwo do things with her body that I'd never seen a living being do, pushing through gravity settings that should have been fatal, and I thought, like everyone thought at first, this is just a deathworlder being a deathworlder. This is just raw toughness. Impressive but simple. Past 30 hours, Vol started getting frustrated. I could see it. Because 30 hours was already extraordinary, near the all-time records, and Sella showed no sign of stopping, no sign of the breaking point Vol had promised to find. So Vol started pushing harder, cranked the gravity higher, added heat, added the shifting, treacherous ground, layered on every form of misery the crucible could produce, hunting for the bottom of her, the place she'd crack. And she didn't crack, she adapted. Every new horror Vol added she absorbed, adjusted to, kept going. Past 40 hours. Past 50, past the all-time record, the one that had stood for generations, broken now by a first-day cadet who barely seemed to notice she'd done it. Past 60. Past 72, 3 full days, a thing no being had ever done in that machine. And somewhere in there I stopped seeing it as toughness, because toughness gets you through a hard thing to the other side. Toughness has a destination: you endure the trial and then you finish and you come out. But Sella wasn't heading for the other side. She wasn't trying to finish. She'd blown past every record, proven every point, and she just stayed, kept going. Deeper and deeper into the machine, past the place where any point was left to prove, and I started to understand that I was no longer watching an endurance run. I was watching someone who didn't want to come out. Vol saw it too. Vol saw it before I did, probably. Vol had centuries of reading cadets. And around the 4th day, Vol did something I'd never seen the instructor do. Vol went to the intercom that connected to the crucible interior, and instead of pushing her harder, Vol said quietly, "Cadet, you've broken every record that exists. There's nothing left to prove in there. You can come out. You've won, come out now." And Sella's voice came back over the comm, strained, exhausted but steady, from inside that crushing hell, and she said, "I'm not in here to win, instructor. I told you. You're looking for my breaking point. I'm not going to stop you. Keep looking. I want you to find it too. I want you to find it too." That's the line that changed everything for me, because it wasn't the line of someone proving how strong they were. It was the line of someone who was looking for something, who needed the machine to keep pushing, who wasn't enduring the crucible but using it, reaching for something at the bottom of herself that only the machine could take her down to. She wanted Vol to keep pushing, not to prove she couldn't be broken, but because she was trying to get somewhere, someplace inside herself, and the only road there ran through the deepest settings the crucible had. Vol went quiet after that. And then Vol did the thing that told me even the instructor didn't understand yet what was happening. Vol kept pushing, because Vol still thought this was about finding a physical or mental limit, still thought there was a bottom to reach, a breaking point that would end the run. Vol didn't understand yet that the thing Sella was reaching for wasn't a limit. It was a wound, and you don't reach a wound by adding more gravity. But Vol didn't know that yet. So the run went on, past the 4th day, past the 5th, into ranges of time and suffering that no record had ever imagined, a Deathworld girl alone in a machine built to break the galaxy's strongest, refusing to come out, asking to be pushed harder, reaching down and down into herself for something none of us could see. Let me tell you what I learned about her, over those long days, because I was the one who talked to her most. Someone had to monitor her constantly through the comm, checking her state, and I took most of those shifts because, I'll be honest, because I was drawn to her, to the mystery of her, to the question of what she was doing in there. And over the hours, in the long stretches between drills, she talked to me. Not much. She wasn't a talker. But in that machine, exhausted past the point where people keep their guard up, she let some things out. And slowly, piece by piece, across days, I started to understand what Sela Okonkwo had come to Threshold carrying. She'd had a sister, younger. Her name was Amma, and on Car's world, where every day is a fight to survive, Sela had raised her more or less, their parents dead early, the way parents often died on a death world, leaving a slightly older child to keep a younger one alive. And Sela had kept Amma alive. For years. Through everything that world threw at them, Sela had stood between her little sister and the 1,000 deaths of Car's world. And she'd been good at it, the best, because keeping Amma alive was the thing she'd organized her entire self around. And then when Sela was 19 and Amma was 15, there'd been a day. A predator, one of the big ones, the kind that hunted humans, had gotten into their settlement. And Sela had done what she always did, put herself between it and her sister. But this time there'd been a choice, a terrible splitting-second choice, the kind the Deathworld specialized in. Two people in danger at once in different directions, and only one of her. And Sela had made a choice. She'd moved to save someone else, a child, a neighbor's child, closer to the immediate danger, trusting that Amma, older and tougher, could hold on the extra few seconds it would take. Amma couldn't hold on. Those few seconds were the ones that mattered. Sela saved the neighbor's child and lost her sister in the same moment because she could only be in one place, and she chose the other place, and she'd been living inside that choice ever since. That was what she was carrying. That was what she'd brought to Threshold, to the Crucible, not a need to prove she was strong. A need to be punished. A need to suffer as much as she believed she deserved to suffer for the choice she'd made, for the sister she hadn't saved. She'd come to the one place in the galaxy built to inflict precise, measured, endless suffering, and she'd walked into it, and she was refusing to come out, because some part of her did not believe she had the right to come out. Not while Amma was in the ground and she was still breathing. I didn't understand all of that at once. She didn't tell it to me straight. It came in fragments over days, half-sentences dropped in the exhausted spaces between drills. But by the 6th day, the 7th, I'd assembled enough of it to understand the shape of what was happening, and it frightened me more than the gravity readings did. Because I realized she wasn't going to come out. Not on her own. She was in that machine looking for a bottom that wasn't physical, a punishment that would finally be enough. And there was no such bottom, because grief doesn't have a bottom, and guilt can't be paid off with suffering no matter how much you spend. She could stay in that crucible until it killed her, and it would, eventually, even a deathworlder. The body has limits even when the will doesn't, and she would never find the thing she was looking for, because it wasn't in there. It was never in there. It was in a grave on Car's world and in the unbearable space in her own chest where her sister used to be. I tried to tell Vol. I went to the instructor on the 7th day and I said, "Sir, she's not doing an endurance run. She's punishing herself. There's something, she lost someone and she blames herself, and she's not in there to break a record. She's in there to hurt herself as much as she can, and she won't stop. She can't stop, because what she's looking for isn't a physical limit." And Vol, hard old Vol, who believed suffering revealed strength, Vol looked at me, and for the first time I saw something shift in those ancient eyes, because Vol had been watching too. Vol had centuries of reading cadets, and Vol had been reading Sela this whole time, and I think Vol had already started to understand, and hadn't wanted to. "You think I don't know," Vol said quietly. "I have watched 10,000 cadets, Tech. I know the difference between a cadet enduring and a cadet punishing. I have seen it before, the ones who come here carrying something, who use the crucible as a place to hurt. I usually catch it early and send them to the counselors. But her," Vol's voice was strange. Her I did not catch, because her body could go so far that I could not tell at first whether it was strength or self-destruction. They looked the same in her, because she is strong enough to punish herself further than most beings can endure at all. And now she is 9 days deep, and I have a cadet in my machine who is trying to die in it slowly, and who is strong enough that the machine may actually let her. Vol turned to the observation window, looked in at the small figure laboring in the crushing gravity. And I do not know how to get her out, because she does not want to come out, and I have spent my whole life pushing cadets deeper into that machine. I do not know how to call one back. That was the thing that undid Vol, I think, in the end. Not the length of the run, not the record shattered, not the impossible strength of her. It was the slow understanding that the machine Vol had devoted centuries to, the great crucible, the revealer of strength, the tool Vol believed in with a whole heart, that this machine had become, for this one cadet, a device for slow self-destruction, and that Vol's whole philosophy had no answer for it. Because Vol believed suffering revealed what you were made of, and here was a cadet whose suffering revealed only how much pain she believed she deserved, which was infinite, because grief is infinite, because you cannot suffer your way out of having lost someone you love. Vol's philosophy said, push them until they break and the breaking shows their limit, but Sela had no limit that mattered. She would break her own body before her will gave out, because her will wasn't trying to survive, it was trying to be punished. And there is no bottom to that. Vol's whole life's work assumed there was a bottom. Sela was the proof that some things don't have one. We reached 300 hours, then 400. The medical readouts were becoming a horror, a body being ground down past every safe limit, held together by nothing but a will that had turned against itself. And Vol stood at that window, hour after hour, watching a cadet try to destroy herself in the machine Vol had built, and I watched the certainty drain out of the hardest being I'd ever known, drop by drop, until there was nothing left in those ancient eyes but a grief that mirrored Sela's own. By 600 hours, Vol had stopped pushing her, had turned the crucible down to its gentlest survivable setting, not because the run was over, but because Vol was no longer trying to find her limit. Vol was just trying to keep her alive, in a machine she wouldn't leave, while the instructor searched, desperately, for a way to reach a cadet who had gone somewhere no gravity setting could follow. And at 800 hours, when it became clear that Sela Okonkwo was going to die in that machine, that her body, Deathworld forged as it was finally reaching the end that even it could not push past, and that she would welcome it, because dying in there was the punishment she'd been reaching for all along. At 800 hours, Instructor Vol did the thing that gives this story its title. Vol walked away from the window. I have to tell you what it meant, Vol walking away from the window, because the title makes it sound like surrender, like the hardest instructor in the galaxy gave up, couldn't take it, abandoned her. That's not what it was. It was the opposite of that, and understanding the difference is the whole point of this story. Vol walked away from the window because Vol had finally understood something that a lifetime of watching cadets suffer had never taught, that you cannot save a person by watching them break, that the observation window, the whole apparatus of measurement and monitoring and pushing and testing, the entire philosophy of Vol's life was useless here. Worse than useless. Because as long as Vol stood at that window, watching, monitoring, treating Sela as a subject to be observed, Vol was part of the machine. Part of the thing punishing her. Another set of eyes measuring her suffering, which was exactly what she wanted, exactly what fed the thing inside her, the belief that she was a problem to be endured, a limit to be found, a strength to be tested. Not a person. Not a grieving girl who'd lost her sister. Vol walked away from the window because Vol finally understood that the only way to reach Sela was to stop being her instructor. And Vol went into the crucible. I have never before or since seen anything like it. Vol, the biotech instructor, the master of the machine, a being who had spent centuries on the safe side of that observation window, Vol powered down the door locks and opened the crucible and walked in. Into the gravity. Into the machine. Vol was old, and Vol's species was hardy but not Deathworld hardy, and the setting in there, even at its gentlest, was hard on an old body. Vol walked in anyway. Walked across that chamber to where Sella lay. She was on the ground by then at 800 hours, unable to stand, her body finally failing and still refusing to signal for extraction, still choosing to stay. And Vol lowered that old scarred body down onto the ground next to her, in the gravity, beside her, not watching from the window, not measuring, just there on the floor of the machine next to a dying girl. And Vol said, I heard it, the comm was still open. Vol said, I'm not going to make you come out, I'm not going to push you anymore. I'm done with all of that. I'm just going to stay here with you, on the floor, because you shouldn't be alone in here. Nobody should be alone in here. A pause. I've been doing this wrong. Your whole life you've been doing this wrong, and I've been doing this wrong for centuries, and it took you nearly dying in my machine to show me. So I'm going to stay. And I'm going to tell you the thing I should have said 800 hours ago, when you first told me you wanted me to find your breaking point. Vol's old voice was very quiet. There's nothing wrong with you that needs to be found and broken, Cadet. You're not a limit to be tested. You're a person who's carrying something no person should have to carry alone, and you can't put it down by suffering. I've watched 10,000 cadets try to suffer their way out of what they carry, and not one of them ever managed it, and neither will you. The only way to put it down is to let someone help you carry it. That's the thing the machine can't teach. That's the thing I never learned until now. And Sella broke. Finally, after 900 hours, because it was right around then, the 800-somethingth hour tipping toward 900, after everything the machine could do to her, it wasn't the gravity that broke her. It was Vol lying down on the floor beside her and saying you shouldn't be alone in here. That's what did it. That's what the whole 900 hours had been building toward, though none of us knew it, though she didn't know it herself. She broke, and it came out of her, all of it, the sister, Amma, the choice, the two directions and the one of her, the few seconds that were the ones that mattered, the neighbor's child she'd saved and the sister she hadn't, the years of carrying it alone on a death world where you don't get to grieve because grief slows you down and slow gets you killed. It all came out, there on the floor of the Crucible, this Deathworld girl who'd never once let herself break, breaking at last not from the machine, but from the unbearable relief of not being alone with it anymore. She wept, great racking sobs that the gravity made harder, that hurt her failing body, and she wept anyway, because it was the first time since Amma died that she'd let herself. And Vol stayed on the floor in the gravity, holding on to that dying girl with old scarred arms, an instructor who'd washed out 10,000 cadets without a flicker of feeling, holding a broken one on the ground of the machine and not letting her be alone. I couldn't save her, Sella wept. I could only be in one place. I chose the other place. I saved the wrong one. I saved a stranger, and I let my sister. I let Amma, and I've been trying to. I came here to. I don't deserve to be the one who lived. I don't. I should have. And Vol said, you made a choice no one should ever have to make, in a moment too short to make it in, and you've been punishing yourself for it ever since. And I need you to hear me, Cadet, because I'm old and I've seen more grief than you can imagine. There was no right choice. There was no version where you saved them both. The world you were born on made sure of that. It put you in an impossible moment, and then it let you blame yourself for not doing the impossible. That's not justice. That's just cruelty wearing the mask of justice. You didn't save the wrong one. You saved the one you could reach, and you lost the one you couldn't. And it wasn't your fault, and no amount of suffering in my machine will make it your fault, because it was never your fault to begin with. A pause. Amma wouldn't want this. You know that. Somewhere under all of it, you know that. She wouldn't want her sister to spend her life trying to die in a machine to pay for a thing that was never a debt. She'd want you to live. That's what the people who love us want when they're gone. Not our suffering, our living. Let her have that, live. It's the only thing left you can still give her. They got her out. Vol called it signaled extraction, finally, from inside the machine, cradling her the whole way as the medical team rushed in. 900 hours and some minutes. The number stands on the wall to this day, and it will stand forever because no one will ever break it, because no one will ever have a reason to stay in that machine as long as Sela Okonkwo did, God willing. It's not a record of strength. Everyone thinks it is. It's a record of grief. The longest anyone ever tried to suffer their way out of a loss, before someone finally lay down on the floor beside them and showed them another way. She almost died. Her body was wrecked. Even a deathworlder has limits, and she'd pushed hers past every one of them. She spent a long time in the medical bay, rebuilding, and then a longer time somewhere else, a quieter place with people trained to help with the thing she'd really been carrying, the thing no machine could touch. Val made sure of that. Val, who'd spent centuries believing suffering was the answer, personally made sure that Sela got the one thing that actually was help, company. The chance to put the weight down at last, and not alone. And Val changed after that. The whole academy changed a little. Because the story got out, how the hardest instructor in the galaxy had walked into the machine and lain down on the floor beside a dying cadet, and how that, not the machine, was what saved her. And Threshold began slowly to understand something it had never understood in all its proud, brutal history. That there are things inside a warrior that no crucible can forge or reveal, wounds that no amount of tested strength can heal, and that the strongest thing a person can do is not endure alone, but let themselves be helped. Val started teaching that. The old biotech instructor who'd believed in suffering spent the rest of a long career teaching cadets the opposite, that the point of being strong isn't to suffer more than everyone else. It's to be strong enough to reach out. Strong enough to say, I can't carry this alone, which is the hardest strength there is and the rarest, and the one the Crucible was never able to teach. I saw Sela one last time years later. She came back to Threshold, not as a cadet. She'd long since graduated, become an officer, a good one, respected. She came back to visit Val, who was very old by then, near the end. And she came to see the machine. I took her down to the Crucible myself. It was quiet, powered down, and she stood at the observation window, the same window Val had walked away from, and she looked in at the empty chamber where she'd spent 900 hours trying to die, and she was quiet for a long time. I don't hate it, she finally said. People think I should hate it. That machine nearly killed me. But I don't, because I didn't go in there to get strong, Corin. I went in there to die slow where I thought I deserved to. And instead, she was quiet a moment, instead it's where I finally put her down, where I finally stopped carrying Amma like a debt and started carrying her like a person I loved and lost. That's different. That's so different. The machine didn't do that. Val did that, but it happened in there, so I don't hate it. It's the place where the worst thing in me finally came up into the light because someone was willing to come into the dark and get it. She turned to me. That's the whole thing, you know, the whole secret. Everyone thinks strength is how much you can carry alone. It isn't. Strength is how much you can carry, period. And you can always carry more when someone carries it with you. I spent my whole life on a Deathworld learning to carry things alone. And it took 900 hours in that machine, and an old instructor lying down on the floor beside me, to learn the thing that world never taught me, that I was never supposed to carry it alone. Nobody is. Val died not long after that visit. Old age at last. And at the end, they say, Val asked for Sela and she came, and she was there when the old instructor went. The hardest being any of us ever knew, and the cadet who'd nearly died in the machine, holding on to each other at the end the way they had on the floor of the Crucible all those years before. I've told this story to 3 generations of cadets now. And they always want it to be the simple story. The strong Deathworld girl who set the impossible record. The 900 hours. Humanity's toughness, proven in the machine that breaks everyone. And I let them have that at first. But then I tell them the real one, because the real one matters more. The Crucible was built to find where people break. It never failed. And then a girl from a Deathworld walked in, and the machine couldn't break her body, so it went looking deeper, and it found the place where she was already broken. A wound no gravity setting put there. A loss she'd been carrying alone since she was 19. And 900 hours in, when even that girl was finally dying, the hardest instructor in the galaxy walked away from the observation window. Not to abandon her. To go in. To lie down on the floor of the machine beside her, and stop measuring her suffering and start sharing it. That's the ending nobody expects. The machine built to break people was defeated not by strength, but by an old instructor who finally understood that no one should be alone in the dark. 900 hours of suffering couldn't save Sela Okonkwo. One being lying down beside her did. Everyone remembers the number on the wall. 900 hours, the record that will never fall. I remember the other thing, the thing that actually matters. That the strongest person I ever knew was strong enough to survive a death world, and a machine built to break the galaxy's finest, and the loss of the person she loved most, and that none of it, was as strong as the moment she finally let someone help her carry it. That's the real record, not the 900 hours she suffered alone. The one moment she finally didn't have to.